Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tsepo Mohapi with Life in Perspective once more. We are continuing as per what we had advertised. We had said we were going to touch on some of the issues that our followers had been trying to get us to talk on. And today we are going to talk about relationship myths. Relationship myths. What are those myths that are generally accepted, or what are those things that are generally accepted within the sphere of relationships or within the area of relationships that a lot of people have assumed are actually truth when they are not. So we are going to touch only on five. There is quite a lot of them, but I'm only going to touch on five of them just to discuss. And I think probably based on how we are discussing them, it should be able to give you some form of system that you can use for yourself as well to make sure that you evaluate other myths that you've picked up where relationships are concerned, and it should help you evaluate them very well for you to be able to be in a space to tell whether some of them are valid or not. And this is very important. So I think prior to us doing anything else, let's just first start by defining what a myth is. In the past few weeks, okay, so there's two words. It's basically relationship and the myth. And I've spoken to you in the past few weeks about the different types of relationships, and I've highlighted the importance of us knowing that the different types of relationships are by choice. And you can choose to be either in a transactional relationship, you can choose to be in a sentimental relationship, or you can choose to be in a value-based relationship, or you can choose to have a cocktail of all three of them. And when I addressed this the last time, I spoke about what I would then consider as important in terms of the hierarchy of things. What are those things that I would consider if I were to go into a relationship? And I had mentioned some of those things where if I were to start a new relationship, I would focus on. And I basically mentioned a cocktail between all of the three. The biggest one being the value based, which accounts for 80% of my decisions to either date or not date. And also the transactional and sentimental, which equally share the 20% that's left. And I strongly believe that you cannot just purely have a value-based relationship with people, or whether it's business related, whether it's romantic. It just cannot be value based. It will have to have some elements of transactional, it will have to have some elements of sentimental. But whatever that you include in any of those has everything to do with the type of relationship you go into. It has everything to do with how you actually value the relationship that you are going into. And that plays a very critical role, because then it allows you to be able to decide how you are going to structure that particular relationship. So that part we have covered, I think, quite extensively. But then let's deal with the myth part. So what is a myth? What is a myth? A myth is something that is wildly held, something that is well known across a huge geographical area, or across a race, or across a people, or across tribes, or whatever the case might be. But it is held even though it is false, is a false notion, or it's a false belief, or it's a false idea. So basically it's wildly held, but it is also false. And whether it's a belief or an idea, it really doesn't matter. But it's a myth because it's wildly held. And because it's wildly held, more than half the time you will find that a lot of people tend to believe that it's true, or a lot of people tend to assume that it's true, because everyone seems to understand the same thing, and everyone seems to know the same thing. And most of the time you will find that if you were to ask for people to explain why this is actually true, more than half the time you find that there isn't really a strong reason behind why such is believed. And many a times you'll find it ultimately ends up as actually not being true. So you could also take it and say it's a misconception, or you can call it a fallacy, or you can call it a false notion. So myths are those things that are misconceptions, that are fallacies, that are false notions, or that are false ideas, that are false beliefs. They are also false narratives that people would actually take on. So let's then just look at which of those are false, which of those myths are out there. So we'll evaluate about 5 of them. You can do more if you like, but we're just only going to do 5 so that we at least have some form of an idea. So there's one that says, the one who loves the most gets hurt the most. The one who loves the most gets hurt the most. So let me highlight all of them first before I start. So the first one is the one who loves the most gets hurt the most. The one who loves the most gets hurt the most. And relationships are all about love. That is the second one. The second one is relationships are all about love. In brackets, you could say love is enough. That's what they're saying. Love is enough. And you will hear the third one would be jealousy is a sign of true love. Some people believe jealousy is a sign of true love. Persistence is a sign of seriousness. So if a person is persistent, if a person keeps pushing, the assumption is that that person is serious. The last one, which is number 5, is intimacy is a good sign of a healthy and happy relationship. Intimacy is a sign of a good sign of a healthy and a happy relationship. So those are the 5 myths that we're going to deal with today, and we'll just have a short discussion on each of those. So let's start with the first one. Let's start with the first one that says the one who loves the most gets hurt the most. The one who loves the most gets hurt the most. So I think let's first look at it from this perspective. Love is a privilege. Love is a privilege. And many a times if we were to say, let's define love, a lot of people would define love as a feeling of intense emotions of intimacy towards a person. A feeling of immense, of intense emotions of affection towards a person. So when you say you love a person, you have some degree or level of affection that you are expressing to that person. And the depth of that love is what determines the level of affection that is there. So now let's understand this now. If a person says the one who loves the most is the one that is going to be hurt the most, I think there are 2 levels to pain. Maybe there's more, but let me only deal with the 2. There is what you call temporary pain, and there's what you call long-lasting to permanent pain. Temporary pain is that pain that comes based on emotions and what you have felt, and you would end up obviously feeling that pain and you'll have to deal with. Most of the time it brings immediate sadness. Now the question is, the ones that normally love the most in a relationship tend to actually feel that immediately when the relationship fails, when the relationship doesn't work. And the one that is assumed not to have loved the most is the one that seems to be walking away from the relationship unfazed, unharmed, unhurt, or, without anything, touching them. But one thing that we also need to understand is that love is a privilege. And love is not something that you'll get everywhere you go. And when love is expressed, to some extent, there are certain levels of love that can be expressed from one person to another that are not common, that cannot be found in everywhere. They are so rare that you cannot find them anywhere. And the reason why some of it is so rare is because of how predominant heartbreaks are. The heartbreaks are so predominant that even the ones that have a huge capacity to love significantly have decided to pull back and not express that love anymore. So it becomes very rare that you will find people that love. So this is how you would look at it. Let's take a situation where 2 people break up, and the one that is said to be loving the most is the one that cries first and goes through the pain. The chances are that person will cry, go through the pain and stress and go through all of that anguish and all of that. But ultimately, because of time, that person will heal. That person will heal because of time. Now, depending on how they choose their conduit of healing or whatever that they use for healing or whatever the case might be, or their coping mechanism to that pain, it can determine how long that pain can actually last. But the ultimate end is that you can actually disperse that pain. You can deal with it and you can move on from it. As opposed to a person who is said to be not as, not as invested in a relationship as the other person. What would generally happen in that particular case is that person leaves unfazed and it looks like they don't care. The sad part about that is that as they continue living their life, they are going to get to a realization of the fact that the level of the love that you have expressed towards them is not something that's common. It's not something that's easy to find. It's not something you stumble upon every day. It's not something that you stumble upon every single time you meet new people. It's something that's actually very scarce. So the realization of the non-existence or the scarcity of that kind of love is what then ultimately hurts them, what ultimately impacts their lives. And the sad part is that more than half the time, that kind of pain is what we call regret, remorse, or sorrow. It's not heartbreak. It's not that sadness that you are feeling when you are hurt because you've loved your person, you've loved the person, you've given them their all, you've given everything you can. It's very different. That person that has decided to walk and realize later on that they have let go of something that is actually unique and so genuine and so powerful, and only for them to realize after they have gone through a series of relationships to realize that whatever I let go of 5-10 years ago, it's something I don't think I will ever find again. That realization is the most painful realization, because it is very hard to recover from that, because there's no other way you can get closure. There's no other way you can get recovery from realizing that you've been messing up this whole time by walking away from certain things, or walking away from a specific relationship that could have been good for you, but you actually messed it up. That is harder to deal with than a person who's dealing with heartbreak, because heartbreak is sadness. Yes, it's an immediate sadness that you experience when the heartbreak happens, but then the person who decides to walk away and ends up regretting or ends up having that realization that what you gave is not common, what you gave is unique, what you gave is rare. That level of regret, that level of remorse, that level of sadness is what ultimately breaks a person. So is it a myth for us to say the one who loves the most gets hurt the most? Yes, it is a myth, because ultimately the one who loves the most is the one that has allowed themselves to express themselves so well. And the good thing about being able to express yourself to that level, and even if you do get disappointed or you do get hurt and learn to recover from that, it frees you from running away from falling in love. It frees you from running away from allowing your heart to interact with other people. For you to allow your heart to interact with other people at that level, it allows you and it trains you to be at the level where you become matured in how you share your love with people, as opposed to people who never actually open themselves up and they just go about using people. Once they get to a realization, you will find a person who was a player in their lives for the most part, and once they get older and they realize they can't play as much as they used to play anymore, and they don't have as much options as they used to have in the past, only then the realization comes in to say, you are not as good as you thought you were. You are not as sly and as hectic as you thought you were. You are actually limited. That realization on its own, it's enough to actually bring a heartbreak that is far longer lasting than a heartbreak that a person, or sadness that a person feels because of a heartbreak. It will bring regret. It will bring remorse. It will bring sorrow in that person's life. And that is why I personally believe that there is nothing wrong with you loving as best as you can in every relationship that you find yourself in, because you putting yourself in that space also trains you to know how to love better, to know how to express yourself better, and you are able to give more to the people you interact with. Who is losing when a breakup happens? I am telling you now, the one who loses is the one that gave less. The one that gave more does not actually lose, because they are learning and they are growing from one relationship to another, or they are growing from whatever experiences and encounters that they are going through as people. So never be afraid as a person to express yourself. Never be afraid to invest yourself in another person. Obviously, with reference to what I've said in the past few weeks, that there is a process you must follow to also make sure you don't throw yourself in hurtful situations unnecessarily. There are some hurtful situations that are not necessary. They can be avoided. They can actually be avoided at all. And I think it's important that we learn to put systems in place that allow us not to just fall for every single thing that comes our way. Then we can learn to appropriate the love that we have, and knowing very well that even if that person walks away, it is their loss, because you gave them the best that you could have given them. Let's do the second one. The second one says relationships are about love. Some people say love is not enough. Relationships are about love. Love is enough. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Relationships are about love. Yes, relationships indeed are about love, but we need to understand something, that when we say relationships are about love, we need to understand that it takes two to tango. So if we say relationships are about love, this is partly true, because what it means is that Unless you learn and know how to love the person you are with the way they want to be loved, you cannot say relationships are about love. You cannot say that everything is about love, because you are unable to love the person that you are with in the relationship the way they want to be loved. So, and we're talking about love languages. If you can appropriate yourself to their love language and be able to master the art of loving them the way they want to be loved, this myth then becomes true. Then it's not a myth. What it means then is you have succeeded in appropriating yourself to loving the person the way they want to be loved, which means then relationship is mainly about love, because in that case you are able to cover all the other aspects. What does that mean? Yeah, it does not mean all you do is give emotions, because love is broader than that. It could mean providing for them, because people are loved differently and people prefer different things and their love languages are different. Some people being taken care of, some people being thoughtful towards them, being affectionate towards them. There are a series of things that could form the cocktail of what a person calls being loved. And all of that being put together, if you can master the art of appropriating yourself to that, then you have mastered the art of being able to do it right. Now, many a times you'll find that if love is only minimized to what we call affection, many a times this creates a problem. That is why you'll find a lot of relationships, they don't survive children. You'll find that a relationship goes well for as long as there is no child between two people, until a child comes into play and everything just changes. And you'll find a lot of single mothers that are raising young children, and you ask, where is the guy? The guy just disappeared, sometimes even during pregnancy or whatever the case might be. Because when you cannot feed one another, when you cannot spend that time with one another and be affectionate as much as you want to, because there's other factors that are influencing this thing. If you have narrowed love only to their affection, many times you will find that that love does not actually survive other things that come into play, especially children, especially other factors that may come from the outside. It becomes very difficult for those people to survive them. This is one of the reasons why I had given you in the past week the 3 different categories of relationships, which is the transactional, the sentimental, and the value-based. Because when you have a cocktail, depending on what your priorities are, you can prioritize sentimental more than transactional, you can prioritize a value more than sentimental and transactional. It's entirely up to you how you structure it. But however way you structure it, it must be such that it fulfills you. It fulfills you and it caters for your needs as a person, and it makes sure that you remain content, you remain fulfilled at any given point in time in that particular relationship. So this becomes very important for us to understand. So yes, some people might say love is not enough, which is a fair statement. Love is not enough because it is based on their definition of love. You know, if a person says love is not enough, it's fine. We hear what they're saying, but first understand, what do they mean by love? What is their understanding of love if they say love is not enough? Because you might find that to them, love is affection. Love is intimacy. That's what love is to them. So when they say love is enough, they are saying affection and intimacy is not all that you need in the relationship, which is quite true. So if that is the definition, you'll find that love is not enough. To them is not a myth, it's actually a fact, because that's how they define love. So many a times you need to understand these things from your own definition, your personal definition of what it means for you to say I'm in a relationship, what it means for you to say I'm in love, what it means for you to say, I have a person in my life. And that becomes important, because that helps you then to be able to determine what is it that is valuable to you, what is it that you categorize as a relationship, what is it that you categorize as love, and so forth. And this is important. Number three says jealousy is a sign of true love. Jealousy is a sign of true love. There's a lot of people even in the past that feel that when a person is jealous, when a person is possessive, when a person is unnecessarily clingy, and that person actually really loves you. And a lot of people believe and they've accepted that as love. Unfortunately, many a times it's a very clear indication of insecurity. When a person is insecure, that person is clingy. That person will not allow you to live your life the way you want to live it. That person would want to dictate every single thing that you do in your life. That person will want to tell you how you must do things. That person will want to make decisions for you. That person will want to tell you when you can leave the house, when you don't have to leave the house, when you can do this, when you can't do this. That person will be so clingy towards you, because jealousy is not a sign of true love. Jealousy is not a sign of true love. True love has a lot of other components in it, and one of them is trust. One of them is trust. And this is important, because that trust is what allows people to be secured in a relationship. that I can trust you, I feel comfortable, I feel there's very minimal risk being with you. Therefore, I feel secured, I feel at peace, and I'm not concerned. But when there's insecurity, and many times you might find that even that insecurity has nothing to do with the current relationship. It might have everything to do with the relationship past of that person. You know, their relationship life and everything that they've experienced in the past is what might be influencing and affecting everything they do beyond that point. And you'll find that whatever that you're experiencing with the person at that point in time has everything to do with the outcomes of what they have gone through in the past. And it becomes very sad because ultimately it then ruins the opportunity of the current relationship surviving and doing very well, because the person has not dealt with what has happened in the past before they walked into another relationship, which is one of the most critical things. When people do not get closure, where people do not settle their minds around things and cut off clean and cut off and move on and deal with themselves towards recovery, because there is no ways you can be attached to a person for a period in time and then you detach and say you are okay. You still need to focus on yourself and see which of those areas require attention, which of those areas are broken that require you to be. That is why it's important when you move from one relationship to another. It is important for you to make sure that in between you've got that period that you are dealing with yourself, that period where you are reflecting on what has happened in the previous one, where you are able to deal with yourself and make sure that you can recover and you can heal from whatever other things that have happened back then. And some of the myths actually that are in relationships today are created by people's pain that comes from previous relationships, and they create myths based on that pain. They create what they would call belief. I believe this about men. I believe men don't understand themselves. I believe women are confused. I believe this, I believe that. And it's mainly it's mainly based on everything else that they have been through in the past. And because they have not dealt with that pain has become a belief for them. It has become a belief. It's something that they have based as the unreproachable truth. It's truth that cannot be questioned. It's according to them, it's infallible. They have proof that it is truth. And it creates problems because many a times, myth after myth, it's like the number of myths over the years just keep increasing because every single person has an opinion about the opposite sex based on their experiences of the previous relationship. And that's how myths most of the times thrive, because people have pain to associate those myths with. People have disappointment to associate those myths with. People have a lot of things that they can link the myths with, and that is important because you need to realize that most of the myths you find in a relationship are a product of pain. They're a product of pain that has not been dealt with. And this is important. Now, the fourth one that I want to deal with is persistence is a sign of seriousness. Now, you can look at this in two parts. It is partly true. It is partly true in a sense that there are people with serious intentions. And whenever they put their mind into something that they want to do, because of their level of seriousness, they are going to be so persistent around it. But also, it doesn't take away the fact that there are those people who pursue other people because they perceive those people as a prize. They perceive them as a challenge that they need to conquer, a prize to attain. And once that person, it's like they live by the thrill. The thrill of chasing to them is what matters in life. If they don't chase, they don't feel like they're living. So they move from one relationship to another, and they are very persistent, and they will do good things, and they will do all the right stuff that you think should be done for a person, any person who's interested in another person, and they'll do all of those things right. But ultimately, their interest is basically to just vanquish. They just want to conquer and then move on and have a track record that they have conquered, and to them, that's what living is to them. And that becomes important because when you are being chased, you must realize that the person that's chasing, if their intention is just to chase because they are chasers by nature and they never actually have intentions to sit down, settle, and have clear intentions and actually show sustainability in what they want to do with the opposite sex, normally you will find that what would happen is once they have achieved what they wanted to achieve, they lose interest. They will lose interest. And you might find that some of them, they chase you because you are beautiful. Some of them chase you because you have money. Some of them chase you because you've got things they want. You have the body structure that is appealing to them. You have the looks that are appealing to them. And they want to conquer that to say, I once dated that person. And to them, that is an achievement. And there are people that live their lives that way. And we cannot take that away and assume that every single person that comes to me means well if they want to get into a relationship. We need to understand that some of these situations are created by people who have been hurt in the past, people who have gone through a lot in the past, and they have decided that they will go out of their way to do the same to others because they just believe that no one knows. Some people don't even believe that love exists, and yet they go about wanting to date and they believe love does not exist. And yet they go about wanting to be with other people because they are chasing something else besides love. They are not interested in love. They are chasing something completely different. The last one I want to touch on is the one that says intimacy is a good sign of a healthy and a happy relationship. Intimacy is a good sign of a happy and a healthy relationship. Now, some people believe that intimacy can save relationships. That's why you find a lot of people, even when a relationship is a week old, they're already intimate. Some will even get intimate on the first date. Some will get intimate on the same day. They have different what you call it. They have different standards to how they choose and decide to be intimate with people. Whatever you want to do, you must just realize one thing. Intimacy provides between the different genders, the two genders. Intimacy provides the same thing across the board. Does not matter who you are. It really does not matter who you are. That intimacy is the same across the board. It does not matter who you are. It's like yes, it's the thrill prior to you being intimate, and you are chasing until you actually get to a space where you are now intimate, and that ultimately then becomes, because now you've attained what you wanted to attain, it's no longer as exciting anymore. And you'll find even a lot of male people have lived their lives that way, where they like chasing, conquering. And it talks to the previous one where we talk persistence, is because the ultimate goal and the ultimate desire for that individual is not to actually have something sustainable. For them is to just find intimacy. So if a person is intimate with you, it does not necessarily mean that that person actually has good intentions, or that person wants to have a future with you, or that person wants something sustainable. Sometimes it could just simply mean that's all they want, and after that they are going to move on. And that is important for us to understand. And the other one, you will find that a lot of people tend to believe that a baby can save a relationship. There are some people that would want to get into a relationship and say, if I can have a child in a relationship, that baby can save a relationship. Or if something drastic happens in a relationship, that thing can save a relationship. Nothing can save a relationship except the intentions of the people getting into a relationship together. It takes two to tango. You cannot get into a ring alone. If you want to box, you have to have an opponent. In a relationship, you don't get into a relationship alone. You have to have a partner, and you have to work together towards a common goal, which is one of those reasons why I gave you the 4 steps of getting into a relationship. And I believe that is critically important, and that is very, 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 very critical for us to understand. And it's going to help you to get into a space of your life where you understand that whether you are intimate with a person, whether you provide certain things with a person, whether you do this or you do that, that does not mean that that relationship will survive. There is a lot more that goes into it than just that. That's why I then mentioned to you guys that talking prior to entering into a relationship is one of the most critical things that you can ever do, that will help you and save you a lot of time, save you a lot of heartache. Learn to spend time, a month or 2 or 3, even more, depending on your ability to judge character. Some of us are not good judges of character. We need to spend enough time around people for us to figure them out. Some can judge character in a week. Some can judge character in a month. Some can judge character the first meeting. When they meet a person, they can already tell, this person 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But people are not the same, and you need to do things according to your abilities and your capabilities. Do not put yourself in a space where you want to subscribe to the norms or want to align to the norms when you know very well that you are not capable of doing certain things the way other people do them. Do it the way it works for you. And what is important is make sure that you gather as much information about the person you want to be with. Get to know them better. You lose nothing spending time knowing a person than jumping into something and regretting when you are in the middle of it, because you realize that you have jumped out of a frying pan straight into the fire. You can avoid that. So there's a lot that we can avoid by just simply talking. So there are a lot of other myths, like I said, but I only wanted to speak about these ones. So sit sometimes and evaluate. Why do I think the way I think about relationships? Why do I feel the way I feel about relationships? Many a times you will find that it was initiated by pain that you never dealt with. Thank you so much.